Victims, enablers, and flying monkeys. Oh my, what are the differences? I'm going to put your question out there. I'm going to read it out loud before I get into it, although that was pretty much the question. I just want people to see word for word what you're asking. Here we go. Let's get into it, shall we? Can you kind of clarify the difference between a person that is also a victim versus an enabler flying monkey? I'm going to respond to some of what you're asking in a sort of blanket form, and then I'm going to get into the differences just from sharing my own personal experience. I think that's the best way to answer your question, which I've been mulling over quite a bit, because I know that we have the tendency to try to find the benefit of the doubt for people who are maybe behaving like the flying monkey. And that way, the way that we can do that is to look at them as a fellow victim kind of thing. I'm not saying that you're doing that. It is our instinct to try to justify other people's bad behavior, because that's how we survived our childhoods, to try to soften the blows that we were receiving from our abuser. We have this thing where we justify, we look for reasons behind it, that sort of thing. Also, the abusers themselves are telling us it's not that bad, or it's our fault, or whatever they're doing to justify behavior. So we come across this from two different angles. One, I think it's instinctual to soften the blows. Two, it's programming from the abusers themselves. So I think it's important that we look at this in a broad way. In my opinion, anybody who is working on behalf of a person's abuser, meaning, oh, it wasn't that bad and they didn't mean it and they love you and why don't you forgive them and talk to them, that sort of thing, that's an enabler. So they are one and the same. Anyone who is sending messages back and forth, solicited or unsolicited, is a flying monkey, and therefore falls into the category of enabler, unless they're standing up for the person who's being hurt against the person who's doing the hurting. And they may not realize the difference between the two and who is what. Although when it comes to parent and child, I think the power dynamic pretty much speaks the volumes that you would need. Like it yells, if you've got a 4-year-old child and everybody's saying that child, just as an example, is the family liar, because that's when my reputation started, and nobody is questioning it and going, well, what are the adults in the room saying? Like, that's absurd, right? Kind of thing. So those people are both flying monkeys and enablers, and they might also be victims. It doesn't give them any sort of pass, and I'm not saying that you are trying to give a pass. I think you're seeking understanding, and part of it is likely connected to the guilt that we feel in shutting people down because they might be victims too. So I'm going to address this from the personal perspective now. And that's going to include people who are in the narcissistic family system, people who are connected to my mother and the narcissistic family system, and then people who are just connected to my mother outside of the system. I'm pretty sure I'm going to touch on all three, because sometimes there's no crossover. And I say pretty sure because I might get there and go, oh no, they all know each other. But anyway, and when I say people not connected to the narcissistic family system, or people who are but are connected to my mother, I hope you're following along here because I'm confusing myself. What I mean by that is, I don't want to call them friends. My mother is a sociopath and a narcissist. She doesn't have friends. She's incapable of friendship. It's all about transaction. There's nothing that's reciprocal in these relationships. And to be friends with someone, that requires some level of reciprocity and no level of transaction, in my opinion. So, and along the lines of those, I'll call them relationships because they're not real. My mother has people that she has been in relationships, can't even talk anymore, for decades. Not consistently. She has the ones where she's clearly done something wrong and they have left her, and then she hoovers them back in time later, when they will not have remembered or given the benefit of the doubt or whatever it is, and she hoovers them back in, and they stay a while, and then they go again, and then they stay a while, and then eventually some of them become permanent. They're done, right? So that's one level of the decades-long relationships that my mother has been involved in, where they walk away and she grabs them back in. Now let's get to the flying monkeys, enablers, and victims. So my aunts are younger than my mother. They are the little sisters. There's no question in my mind that they have been victims of my mother over the years. And as victims of my mother, they also became flying monkeys and enablers. Her behavior towards them, I'm sure, has been normalized because that's what they grew up in. And my grandmother is I call her the OG, the original gaslighter. And my grandfather, TW warning here, was a person who perpetrated CSA against me. And I only say me because I don't know what their experience was, the three sisters. I think my mother was a victim based on her behaviors. I think my youngest aunt was a victim based on her behaviors. I'm not so sure about the middle sister. So they grew up in the house being victimized by multiple people. And so, yeah, I would say that I qualify them as victims of the entire system, including my mother. I also qualify them as flying monkeys and enablers, all wrapped up into one. And in no way, shape, or form do they get any, not that you're saying, how do we do this, give them a pass or whatever. They don't get a pass. And the reason they don't get a pass is because at some point, all of them became mothers themselves. So they had that experience to see how easy it is to love and protect a child. And they knew damn well that my mother was abusing me, and they chose the abuser. 2014 was her most recent arrest for fraud, selling fake handbags. She's been sued by major fashion houses. They know she's a criminal. They know about her criminal activities. She has activities prior to that. They've known all along through my entire growing up life, and they, with knowledge, chose her. So they are enablers. Rock solid, and victims, rock solid, and flying monkeys, rock solid. Now let's get to the connections outside of the family, those relationships, and we can even do the connections of same generation children. So like my cousins, for example. My cousins have never, to my knowledge, been victimized by my mother, but they have been gaslit and brainwashed by my mother. I guess if you've been gaslit, that's a form of abuse. So I'm just going to go with they have been brainwashed by my mother. They have drank the Kool-Aid that the family system has put into place. Since I was 4 years old, I'm the family liar. So they grew up in that system. They don't know any better. Could we say they're a victim? I guess so. In some way they are. I don't know their growing up life. I know some of it. I know some of the dynamics. They would be my mother's flying monkeys in that they would stand rock solid with her. I know this with my older cousin, who's a year younger than I am, for a fact, because I ran into him out of the blue in the street years ago, and he asked me why I ran away from home. Nobody had really asked me that question before, and I was trying to tell him about my mother and even dropping me out of a 2-story window, and he's like, "That's my favorite aunt." That makes him hers. So he's a flying monkey in that he's telling me, but she's so great. He's taking up for her. He is being her messenger without even knowing it. Is he enabling her? I'll let you be the judge of that. I think so. I think anytime that you're standing up for somebody in the face of abuse, you are approving of that abuse, and therefore you are enabling that abuse. Now let's talk about the connections, the friendships. They don't grow up in our experience in our household. They're not seeing things day in and day out. And if I had a dime for every time I heard a person say about somebody else, their family is so wonderful, or I know the mother, she's so great, and I say back to them, yeah, but you didn't grow up behind those closed doors. So you're seeing a snippet of that person and the experience that's actually happening behind the scenes. They may be great to you, but that doesn't mean that they're great. Translate that to the connections that my sociopath narcissist mother has. They nurture their likability. They're not abusing everyone, although everyone is at risk of being abused by them. They are using people and figuring out where they fit and what their usefulness is, because all of these relationships are transactional. All of them. That is an absolute. For a girl who doesn't like absolutes, I'm going absolute on that one. So when you look at it in that framework, they don't have to be victims to be sucked in and to have maybe a certain amount of being naive. You know, they don't have to be victims to be flying monkeys and enablers without realizing that that's what they are. They might be people who came from healthier family dynamics and can't imagine a mother doing to her children what my mother did to me. And they're seeing this surface person who's nurturing their likability. So then they're coming in and they're giving information back and forth, not knowing how much they're damaging the victim, because they don't see the child as the victim. They see, oh, but your mother loves you, because they're hearing a narrative of the mother trying so hard, and I love my child so much, and my child is struggling, and I'm at my wit's end, and I don't know what to do. And, you know, they're seeing that part of it. For me, I was a runaway. I was constantly running away. My mother's telling her relationships, I don't know what to do with her. I don't know what's wrong. I don't know why she keeps doing this. I'm at my wits. Like, she's got some mental issues, and, you know, she's smear campaigning me. She's creating a narrative. These people have no idea. I don't get in trouble in school. I do very well. I'm a very quiet, well-behaved, obedient, fawning, freezing child. They don't know that. They just see this person who's the victim of me. Should they have the common sense to go, you're the bigger person, she's a child? Absolutely. But sometimes people just don't, because they walk through life, like we all do to some degree, seeing things through our own lens. When I see a relationship, a mother, a father, a child, I don't automatically assume it's unhealthy or healthy. I come at a very neutral place. But if I hear some things, my instinct is to say to that child, oh, but your mother loves you. Just because she's beating you doesn't mean she's not doing the best she can. Do you know what I'm saying? I have a lens that allows me to think critically around that a little differently, or maybe a lot differently, from someone who cannot imagine a mother hurting a child, or a father for that matter. But, you know, we all know mothers get held up on a higher pedestal, because after all, they've bonded in utero all that time with their baby and all of that. If my mother could have beat and starved me in utero and had an aesthetically healthy child, trust me, she would have done it. Anywhoosie, I hope this answers your question, that it's not one or the other necessarily. Sometimes it's all three, and it actually doesn't matter. The fact that somebody becomes a flying monkey and isn't critically thinking, you know, it doesn't matter if they're also being victimized. What matters is if they're not listening. And if you're saying to them, please don't share my information with my mother, or talk about her, or bring her up. I'm going from my experience. I would like to maintain a relationship with you, but this is our relationship. If they can't respect that, then at that point, they are making a conscious decision to be a piece of relationships. That's a fact, and it doesn't matter why. Or if they keep bringing up, oh, but you should forgive your mother, and and you tell them, listen, my mother has hurt me, is continuing to hurt me, and I choose not to allow for that anymore, and they refuse to hear that, then that is also a relationship. And that is a person who is an enabler, a flying monkey, victim or not, doesn't deserve your time or your energy or your thought. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the question. I really love these topics of discussion, because I know that a lot of us carry a lot of questions and wounds from all of these relationships that turned relationship. They probably were so in the beginning, and we've lost them, and we're trying to figure out, can we keep anyone? And if they're a victim too, well, maybe they can relate, or at least I can give them a pass. Nobody gets a pass. Nobody. I don't get a pass. Nobody gets a pass. Passes are earned, not just given, and they're earned through mutual respect, through being a good person and showing up as a loving, kind person in a relationship, which should include feelings of being safe, seen, and cherished. And if it falls below that bar, well, you're in the wrong place. Thank you. See you soon.